So hello and welcome to this first video on getting started with modular synths. Now for this first episode I have Andrew Huang, who great musician, YouTube channel full of some great beat making ideas and all sorts of musical fun bits and production tips as well. Now I made this video with Andrew back in around August of 2017. It's now January 2018. So it's quite a long time before this series came to be, but the kind of idea of what this is and the formation of this series is now kind of done and in the works. So each month through 2018, starting with this one, I'll have a video where it's a live stream. You can join in. We'd love for you to be in the live chat. I'll have a guest on, or maybe a couple of guests, talking about getting started with modular synths. Now that could be someone that's just getting into modular synths, someone that's been into it for ages and kind of passing down some wisdom and what they wish they knew when they got started, or someone that's kind of notable for other reasons outside of modular that's maybe not into modular yet and they want to ask some questions. It's a series that I just want to kind of give back to people getting into modular synths, talk about ideas, patching, what to do to get started, and not get too bogged down in the kind of technical aspects of getting a modular synth. Just talk more freely, artistically, stylistically, approaching getting into modular synths. So enjoy this episode with Andrew Huang, and there'll be at least one video a month with various people on getting started with modular synths. Cheers for tuning in. Hello, and welcome to this new series of interviews of me, DivKid, or Ben, whichever. It's cool. The new show is on getting started with modular. It's not going to be a technical show. We're not going to talk about power and how to plug modules in and all that kind of things. I want to look at people's musical output, how modular's fitting into their workflow, all the different avenues they may be going down, the kind of musical concept type stuff, as opposed to heavy technical information right off the bat. So, our first guest is Andrew Huang. How's it going?
Good. Thanks for having me, Ben. I guess maybe I can start by just like introducing myself for anyone who doesn't know. I'm a musician of many different descriptions. I've done a lot of composing, songwriting, recording, producing, even used to like mix and master occasionally for other people. And I have been really finding my home in YouTube. So I do a lot of original music, a few covers, some videos about my process, just kind of anything I want to share about music. You know, it could be any instrument, genre, new gear, kind of review sort of stuff happens now and then. But there's no set format. It's just like a love of music that I hope I can share with anyone who's interested in watching. Oh, and I guess I'll mention like one of the things that I've become known for is sampling really strange things, like anything from carrots to balloons to pants, and making music with just like sound sources you never would have thought could be used musically.
Yeah, I think that idea that just a love of music, that's certainly what I'm getting from your channel. AndrewHuang.com, I'll put this in the video description, or right there on YouTube as well. A huge range of styles and all really good quality. You know, if you know a producer that makes amazing kind of R&B, that doesn't necessarily mean they can pick up a guitar and do a kind of rock kind of track, but yeah, the quality of the stuff you're putting out is amazing.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, no, I've always loved a huge range of genres, and so I kind of try my hand at a lot of them, and if it doesn't work out, I don't post it. So
that's fair enough. You've nicely led on to kind of where I wanted to start with this. Obviously the introductions, but then what gear you were using prior to you getting into modular. We should say that I guess over the last year or so, you've maybe been looking into this and recently taken a dive into Euro rack.
Yeah, well, the modular journey has been like, it's been an interest for me for several years, but for a long time it was something that I just kind of had to try and like push that voice way in the back of my head because I knew I couldn't afford it really. I kind of tried to convince myself, oh, maybe like the same sounds or the same resulting music I could get with the software or the traditional instruments and synthesizers that I'm using. And I also started exploring it from Reactor, and there's a couple other programs and emulations that'll let you do modular sort of things, but Reactor is sort of where I got my hands on something that would kind of show me what the possibilities were. And then it was just in the last, I don't know, 3 months that I started actually building up my hardware rig and experimenting with that, and just I'm still seeing where it takes me. But to answer your question before that about what gear I used before, I grew up playing piano. In my teens, I took up some guitar and electric bass. I got into like making beats around, I don't know, 14, 15 maybe. And yeah, just have always really loved all aspects of music, from writing to recording to arranging. And so I think when computers became powerful enough and accessible enough that you could like create entire tracks at home, on your home computer, that sort of really sucked me in. And, regardless of what instruments I was learning or what kind of songs I was writing, everything sort of ended up centering around the DAW. And I've used like 10 or 15 different ones over the years, but it really became about like, how do I create complete pieces of music, whatever the genre is, whatever the instrument is. Yeah. So I guess I think for the longest time, the recording studio has been an instrument for me more than anything else.
Yeah. And carrots and water bottles and everything else, as you said, sampling strange things, which is cool. And some of that into this stuff, modular, could be really interesting too. I should say we've got the YouTube live chat going as we capture this, although it will go back on YouTube quite a bit later than we're actually recording it. But Ryan Tan's just asked in the YouTube chat, what's this modular thing about? So I should probably say a little bit more, I guess, who I am, because we're kind of pulling from both our audiences at this point. As DivKid, which you'll see kind of little orange characters around the videos I'm doing, I work with this stuff, this kind of tower of synthesis equipment. You buy an empty case, much like building a PC and putting your own processor in and motherboard and RAM and so on. You buy a case and you build a synth or a sampler or a processing unit. It's all hardware. Most of it is analog. A lot of it now is digital, but still feels very real and analog because it's behind a panel with knobs and often not even a screen, even when it is digital. I'll pull an image up that's a bit clearer than my background, just for those that are kind of wondering, as Ryan said in the chat, what's this modular thing about? So that's a modular system. It screws in, the modules are bought separately, they screw into rails, and that's it. And you can see there with the kind of spaghetti of cables going on that you patch everything. The whole signal flow is custom. You pull the cables out, start again. You choose the modulation, effects, sound sources. It's an open platform for synthesis, sound generation, and processing. So it really is what you want. It's kind of a hard question to answer. And I guess we'll get on to Andrew's intentions for his system and some of what my first stuff was as well. So that, I guess, leads into, just before getting into systems specifically, what kind of sparked that initial wanting to get into modular a few years ago? What was that? Was there an artist or something you'd seen, or kind of what drew you into modular?
I'm not even sure, I'm trying to think of like what my first kind of introduction to it was, and it may have been learning about Buchla synthesizers. And just seeing them, they're like so otherworldly. You can't imagine like how to use them just by looking at them. But I remember, maybe this was it. I was listening to an indie rock band called the My She, and they have as one of their members Ezra Buchla, who is Don's son. And so I was kind of like following the internet wormhole, and I'm sure that must have been how I discovered Buchla synths, and didn't really know anything about them, but was definitely captivated, by the strange sounds that were coming out of them and the amazing way that they look. So I think that was probably the first kind of time that modular was on my radar. And then kind of just by happenstance, I got into Reactor just because I was using a lot of other native instrument stuff, and then Reactor became a place where I could explore making my own synthesizers in software. And they have a fantastic user library that you can learn a lot from and get amazing kind of homemade plugins from. And so Reactor sort of became the place where I learned kind of the power of modular, and started kind of getting my head around some of the types of modulation you could do, some of the way the signal flow works. And for whatever reason, it wasn't until earlier this year that kind of, for lack of a better word, I guess, a synthesis of things came together. I think, listening to artists like Caitlin Aurelia Smith, Suzanne Chani, like, I started finding that more and more of the music I was being drawn to was actually created on modulars. And then I started doing research, started realizing there's even more that you can do with these setups than I had realized before. And that was it. I got obsessed and had to start buying some stuff. I spent like all my spare time this summer basically like researching modules and watching your videos and many other modular videos. There's an amazing community online for this stuff. Yeah, so that was kind of the journey.
Yeah, we should say, just realizing with getting started with modular, there are a few formats of modular. This stuff behind me is Eurorack. Anyone that's familiar with rack gear, compressors, preamps, that sort of thing in the studio, this is 3 units high, what we call 3U Eurorack format. Andrew mentioned in the booklet, I'll pull up some images of other formats. That's 5U. You might be able to see on the image compared to the backdrop of me, it's slightly bigger than Eurorack, 5 rack units high as opposed to 3. And that's a Buchla system, which is 4 units high, if you were to put all these in a kind of studio rack system. It's interesting you mentioned Caitlin Aurelia Smith. I think she's been an influence for a lot of people in terms of, I mean, musically, yes, but also the kind of looking into what she's doing. And I think Fact Magazine posting the video with her, as well as the things with Moog Music as well, pulling people into modular. She came and played at a sort of co-event of mine a few weeks ago on this UK tour she was doing. Absolutely stunning live. Really, really amazing performance. Very, very musical, singing, performing with a Buchla system, and other controllers and all sorts of things. A real kind of command of technology for a really focused output.
Yeah, I remember hearing her, I think it was her Ears album for the first time. That was my introduction to her work. And that album made me realize how much more could be done with modular. I think, part of this was probably me just trying to like spare my bank account, but it was also the kind of an opinion that I developed that like, oh, well, like you could get all this amazing gear, but like so much of what I hear coming out of it is just like random kind of beeps and boops. And they're like really great beeps and boops, but it seemed a bit homogenous. So it was cool to see someone like Caitlin Aurelia Smith, and now I've discovered all different kinds of other artists who are putting out music that is very modular based, but very distinct. Each artist has their own flavor, and it's something different than what I thought was kind of the general picture of the scene from what I saw from the outside.
Yeah, I'll pull it up just as a reference for those wondering who we're talking about. This is Caitlin Aurelia Smith's album, Ears. That's a Bandcamp, but you can find it all over the place. Well worth checking out for whether you're interested in modular or not. A great electronic album. It's interesting you mention it. Kind of, I did a similar thing getting into modular, where I was a bit like, no, I don't need this. No, this isn't going to kind of help me in any musical way. And I mean, it's kind of spawned my video work, working with a lot of companies on this stuff, but I did kind of put it off for monetary reasons. It's certainly not cheap. But I love it's a bit like handing, I mean, I know you play guitar, so do I. We'd both play different things if we picked up the same guitar. And I love that about modular as well, that not only can the same size case be entirely different in terms of the system and what we choose to put in. But both me and you and your friends and my friends, we'd all use modules completely differently, even-handed the exact same system.
Yeah.
And I think that's the appeal for me. Despite this big thing going on, I really like small focused cases that guide me down a path. I think some sort of restriction often inspires some creativity.
It's interesting, like the you know, and I've only kind of played with the few modules that I've had, and the you know, sometimes if I've been in a store, I've tried a few things out, but I already can see how it's like a conversation with this machine, like depending on what's available to you, and kind of like the first few decisions you make, that keeps leading on, and there's this back and forth that kind of, I don't know, you can't necessarily go in thinking like, here's exactly what I'm going to create. Almost each patch cable you put in, you kind of like figure out what the machine's giving back to you and then where you can take it. It's really an amazing process.
Just watching the YouTube chat, and I'll keep dipping in and out for those that are watching, should you want to ask us any questions as we go. We have a rough structure, but Eric has just asked, what's a good starting point for someone interested in starting with modular synthesis? Any personal recommendations? My response just in the YouTube chat was that that's a little bit too open of a question. Imagine we can touch on a few things, but it's really hard to. It depends, for Eric and anyone watching, it very much depends on what you want to do. You could recreate a classic synth, which may not be the most exciting thing for the formats. It can be so much more. But if you really want an authentic sounding TB303 or a Model D Moog, but you want extra patching and you want a system to learn on, or you want to build a custom drum machine or sampling machine to plug a guitar into, there's loads of potential avenues you can go down. So I get asked this a lot with my channel entirely focusing on modular and tiny bit more, but it's pretty much 90% modular.
I would even take one step out from that though, and say that you could start with software. Kind of the way I did, and you know, watching a lot, like there's amazing YouTube videos and the Muff Wigglers forum, where you can, and you probably should, learn a lot about what is out there and what is possible. And then you know, if you get like something like Reactor, or Arturia has made some emulations. I think they've done something that's like a Moog and something that's like a, what's the other one, like an ARP 2600. And you can kind of have these much more affordable sort of plug-in versions of semi-modulars that you can patch, just to start to internalize what all these sorts of functions are capable of.
Yeah, I definitely mirror that. Reactor Blocks is fantastic and very much looks like using modular gear, and slightly less daunting than just diving straight into Reactor kind of programming, because it has a really nice interface that looks like plugging modules in. There's a soft tube modular as well now. I've not used that one, but I've heard it does sound great, with some official kind of software versions of some of this analog stuff as well. Yeah, I'd really learn synthesis in a synth like Massive or Serum, or even how FM works in Operator in Ableton. Get a feel for what you want to do. And then maybe, as you mentioned, semi-modular, maybe start there with something like a Arturia Micro Brew or Mini Brew, or like the new reissued Korg MS-20 or something that will give you sound in entirety, but have some building blocks for you to learn, and that will inform what kind of direction you want to go in. There is, and I do get asked, can I actually reach it or not? I'm 6'4" and I can reach it. There is up there a micro brew on top of the system, which it serves as a keyboard to play the modular. It's got lots of points to interface. I can patch in extra modulation or sequencing. I'd say that's a good way to go. Another way to think about getting into modular as well, Olivier from the company Mutable Instruments kind of answered this question, taking a step back and saying, rather than saying you need an oscillator to go into a filter, to go into a VCA to control its amplitude, he said, look at it in a much simpler way. You need something that makes sound, which could be an external input. It could be a microphone on your voice. It could be guitar, drum machine, anything. You need something to modulate that sound so it's not static. I mean, it wouldn't be static if you were playing an instrument, but if you buy just an oscillator, it will just drone endlessly. You need something to tell it what to do. And then you want some kind of effect to process the sound. So think about, what sound do you want to create? You need something to generate it. And then you need something to process it. And you need something to tell that what to do and when, such as a sequencer with a drum machine. Take an 808, it doesn't do anything until you punch a sequence in. So yeah, I think software and potentially semi-modular is a really good way to get into this stuff. So I guess this kind of leads down our kind of rough structure for this chat, but how did you first see modular fitting in with your current kind of musical output? So you were interested, these musical influences, what did you kind of think it would do for you?
Yeah, well, as I started discovering more artists that, you know, kind of were broadening the horizons of the sort of sonic landscape of modular for me, I started thinking about the strengths of modular, and what I would do in my music that could really make use of that. Those strengths being its flexibility. I think one of the big things is the I guess the non-repetitive nature of it. The fact that you can have so many overlapping modulations happening in different amounts of time that it really leads to this kind of music that feels much more organic. So, you know, and the kind of music that I've been really interested in listening to for a lot of my life has been this sort of electronic stuff that isn't super loop based or super repetitive, but that really evolves and morphs over time. So I think, you know, after getting into this more, I've realized that a lot of these musicians I looked up to were probably doing something modular or semi-modular in those pieces. But yeah, so I kind of, I've been saying I have three approaches to how I want to get into modular and how I want to be using it. And, you know, I still feel like I'm in a learning phase with it, but I'm a beat maker, like, at heart. I've been really into hip hop since I was a kid, and you know, that's just something I could do every single day and never get bored, is like make beats. So taking that into a modular context really interests me, you know, finding ways to kind of create pieces that are based in that sort of like hip hop and electronic world, but with a little bit more, you know, a little bit more dynamic kind of liveliness, rather than just like, here's a sample from a vinyl record, here's a 2-bar drum loop, and we'll repeat it. Another approach is I'm really interested in processing external audio. You know, I've done so much with sampling these weird items. And I do like to sometimes keep those very raw, like just hitting an apple. We'll just record hitting an apple and that's the sound we're going to use. But other times I might like stretch that out or pitch shift it, you know, a huge amount, put a ton of reverb on it, whatever it is. And so I like the idea of taking unorthodox sound sources and then further processing them in unorthodox ways. And then kind of along those lines, the same kind of thing with my voice or with guitar or any other instrument, is finding effects that are a little bit outside of the ordinary, you know, not just your distortion or your delay, but something that, that breathes a little bit more life into the sound, or that really drastically transforms a more familiar sound. And then I think the other branch I really want to explore is just the kind of really hectic, like IDM, electronic, wacky, crazy side of it, of just like constant modulation and really intricate rhythms and yeah, just really complicated music. I don't know, that's what I'm into.
Yeah. No, that's cool. And definitely a nice wide open approach to this stuff. I like that you mentioned hip hop and beat making. A lot of people may not realize this, whether they've been following me for a few years, or they're new, or whatever. It's not particularly what I do as DivKid. But I've been working with quite a lot of UK hip hop for quite a while, and drums is my kind of primary instrument. And we spent years trying to recreate the feel of, well, guys like you, Andrew, that have maybe taken it on an MPC or a computer, and, you know, making beats where they grab the whole hi-hat track and go, I just want this to be 20 milliseconds behind the kick and the snare, and it just gives a certain feel. But as a player, you're taught to play coordinated and straight, and the whole band is taught to do that. And spent a long time with a bass player really trying to nail this, and working with two rappers as well that both produce music, where they can turn around and say, just play a bit more behind the beat, to the bass player, and then point to me and say, yeah, the stuff you're doing with your left hand, can that be slightly early, but then the right hand slightly late, but keep the kick where it is? And as a drummer, you kind of go, no, I can't quite. And to try and apply that to modular, I think it's a great format for it. There's lots of things that allow for more custom kind of timings and grooves. A new module called Pamela's New Workout that I've just done a really comprehensive demo for has a random skip feature. And I think random and modular kind of go hand in hand. But for anyone that's thinking, I don't like random, I don't like, as you said, full-on complex IDM, random's not for me. Imagine trying to play, hitting an apple. Let's take that. Imagine trying to hit that exactly the same every single time. There's a margin of error both in timing, impact, the kind of velocity, where you hit the apple. So applying lots of these little bits of random can be incredibly musical. The same with strumming a guitar chord. You can try to be as straight and rigid as possible, and it isn't, which is what humanized features are for in DAWs and so on. But that module particularly, you can randomly skip between 0 and 100% on anything, whether it's a modulation source or a gate or a clock. So you can just say 2% random skip. And it's almost, I like this kind of conversation with a machine. It's almost like turning around to a friend on stage and saying, just strip out a few of the hi-hats, and it will just randomly strip a few out with a percentage range. And there's a slop feature as well. So you can have LFOs that will just cycle around a shape, but they will slop in and out, and that shape will just bend. And I like thinking it's almost like a drunk. Like jamming with someone that's slightly drunk. You've kind of got control of what they're doing, but they're kind of off out there on their own as well. And
It's true, and it's like kind of a whole new. I think this is something that I would call one of the major sort of changes or developments in music as a whole in the last while, is that we're starting to see all these off-kilter rhythms and these. I think the way I see it is like in working with DAWs and working with computer music, you're so locked into a grid that now finally, when the technology has allowed us to like move things around to like any fine degree that we want, we can introduce some groove back in without it being like a robotic groove where like like a shuffle that everything is, every other note is moved over the exact same 60% or whatever. But I'm seeing it as kind of this new sort of technology that's letting us produce all these weird grooves and have them perfectly repeatable because they're in a digital machine. That's also led live drummers to kind of emulate that. And I'll like I saw Hiatus Coyote, amazing band, a few months ago, and I was amazed at their drummer, the whole band has this kind of timing, but it really comes through when you're seeing the live drummer play these like super weird grooves, but he's managed to lock into it the exact same way every bar with these like a really late hi-hat and a really early snare. I think these kinds of like wonky rhythms are one of the major developments that we've seen lately, and it's cool that we're seeing it on both the machine side and the human side.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, my journey with that, I was gigging on an electric drum kit, I guess a fairly early adopter when I went to university, and I couldn't take an acoustic drum kit into student dorm rooms, so I had to get an electric kit to practice doing a music degree. So there's no way I couldn't have an instrument. But the kind of adoption of people like Flying Lotus and a lot of those brain feeder artists. And as I said, working with rappers and hip hop, those guys turning around and saying, yeah, play a groove like that. And it's just so far away from the kind of structure of learning to play an instrument. It's a whole new language in terms of the adoption of those rhythms. We started with the electronic kit by just introducing, and it was horrible to play, but it kind of worked, introducing timing offsets to the samples. So we'd build up these Ableton drum racks that I was triggering live over MIDI on some Roland V drums. And the hi-hat would have 10 seconds of silence before the initial kind of hit. So it was not tactile at all, because you're kind of getting this sound from the pad and nothing happening. It felt, you know, loads of latency, but just on the hi-hat.
That's an interesting approach.
Yeah, that was the kind of first thing we did, and we were recording what we were doing, and it's interesting certainly how that's gone and how this stuff lets you do that quite freely in a tactile. The biggest sell for me, I should say, for Modular is that it's tactile. I don't care whether things are analog or digital. I'm really not bothered what's behind the panel. It's a real physical interface, and I was kind of exploring that with controllers. That's something I wanted to ask you, actually. Did you kind of go down the controller route, looking for something kind of real to touch after using DAWs?
Yeah, I mean, I always did have at least a MIDI keyboard, and you know, I've upgraded them through the years. Currently, I'm on the Native Instruments, what is it? Complete S61. And it's great. It's like a really, really high quality keyboard, and it's integrated so well with the NI software that it's a pleasure to use. And then I think my first set of drum pads, other than I had an MPC for a bit, but in terms of controllers, I used a trigger finger, which the original trigger finger is amazing. It had the best feeling pads, and I sold it back in the day, and I've never been able to find another one because they've updated it a couple times since. But that thing is from like 10 years ago, and it just had the best feeling pads. So that was great. And then I've got the Micro Brute over here, which is useful for, you know, as control for the Modular. And then Ableton Push, of course. I've had both iterations of that. But yeah, you know, my kind of stance on controllers is that they're really, they all just need to kind of do the same basic things. Like, it's nice to have the bells and whistles of integration with your software or you know, whatever. But it's really like, how does the keyboard feel? How do the pads feel? What kind of knobs do you want? Do you want the infinite ones, or, you know?
Yeah.
It's I've really never been too picky about those pieces of kit, and I think, you know, the cheapest MIDI keyboard around, you can still get someone like just flying on it. So yeah, those are kind of the main pieces I've had, but I haven't necessarily focused a lot on them.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time kind of chasing controllers and custom mapping things in Logic, which is a bit of a nightmare. I found obviously Ableton's much better at that kind of thing. So let's get into your first bits of kit. I mean, the first thing you have to get with this, and the first hurdle, I mean, we won't go too specific, but is a case. The different thing to any other instrument is you need to buy a case to put this stuff in, and it has to have power in there. So what did you go for in the end?
Yeah, so I'll pan over here, and maybe we can fit both me and the machine in the video. But I've got this case from IntelliGel. It's their actually, they only released it like a little over a month ago, I want to say. It's a larger one than they have put out before. There's sort of like a cover for it, so you can travel with it, and it's wide enough that you can leave your patch cables in if you do take it anywhere. So this is, I mean, to get into the Modular lingo a bit, it's two 3U racks and then a 1U on top, and it's 104 HP. So the I guess we can go over this quickly. This is like one unit of rack space on the top, and typically the Euro rack modules are 3 units high, so we've got 2 rows of 3U, and then it's 104 whole points or horizontal pitch. I don't know if you have the answer to what HP properly stands for.
I think it's horizontal pitch.
Okay.
But that's width for anyone watching this.
Yeah.
That's how wide the rows are.
And yeah, you've got all these holes where you can screw in your modules wherever you want to put them, and then there's power back here. You can still see some of the places where you would plug in the module. So yeah, I picked this case because I wanted something where it's got these legs, so you can like lean it down, or you can have it standing vertical. So there's 3 different angles that I can have it at if I want to shoot it in different ways. So that was important to me as a video creator. And then it just felt like the right size for me, something that I knew I wouldn't be able to fill up too quickly, but that wasn't going to be overwhelmingly large. Yeah, and I think too, like price-wise, it was a pretty good deal compared to everything else that's out there, for what you get. And it also has on top these inputs for audio and MIDI. So if you get the right 1U modules, which I did, it's really easy to feed external audio into it, to take the modular audio out to a normal line level, and also to interface with any MIDI device or your DAW. So that was sort of my reasoning behind getting this case, and I've been really happy with it. I still have just under half probably of the space available in it open for.
Yeah, we should say I've pulled this image up of the IntelliGel website. I think you've kind of straight away, and obviously it shows that you've done your research and not just splashed a lot of money up front. Everything's integrated straight away in that case, in terms of like you said, audio in and out with those little tile modules. I'm not quite sure you've seen that picture, but audio in and out. Modular levels are a lot kind of hotter than line level. So you do need some integration in terms of amplifying up external sources and then dropping this level down, often to go into other gear as well. For some reason, this image has flipped. But yeah, you can see the 1U modules there at the bottom, sometimes called tile modules. That's a relatively new thing for the format. Tiny little spaces, but often with lots of really nice kind of space saving in terms of the normal rows, in terms of getting utilities in the system. So yeah, I think a great option for a case. I don't have one personally. The option I went with, for anyone curious, these square cases, this is much better if you're in Europe. They don't travel well in terms of price over to the States and Canada, is the Dope for low cost case. That's a wooden box, basic plywood box. These ones have got 3 rows in, and there's another one on top of the other, and a power supply. Less travel friendly than the IntelliGel, but they're kind of incredibly cheap for what they are, the Dope for low cost cases. So you've got a case. First modules, I guess, is the next thing.
Yeah. Well, so since I was getting an IntelliGel case, and I think because their 1U is sort of a different, just I've heard that they don't play well, not necessarily with other 1U modules. Just for,
Yeah.
I think it was the lip or something doesn't let one fit into the other. I'm not sure which way it goes.
With that being a kind of new thing, there was no standard on that, and I think some of the rails, Z rails, and some are vector rails, and one has a lip and the other doesn't. So the existing tiles by Pulp Logic and Earthenvar won't fit in IntelliGel, and vice versa.
Right. Yeah.
It's a little annoying, but
yeah. Hopefully we'll have a standard soon. But yeah, I got their 1Us to fill up as much as the top row as I could. There's still some space there where I'm debating. But I mean, this is another thing too, is like these HP gaps, which I'm already feeling like I want to fill every possible space, both for usefulness and aesthetic reasons. And sometimes it's just not possible with what you want in your modules and what you have in your case. But yeah, so I guess I got a bunch of things all at once because I ordered some IntelliGel modules with my case. So across the top here, there's the line in and line out, the audio I/O module. So that's just getting stereo, line in and out to the modular. The next one here is noise tools. So you get a pink noise source, white noise source, a pulse, and then this sample and hold that I haven't played too much with, as well as a slew out. And then there's a buffered multiple here, super basic but very handy. And then I also got the micro MIDI, which is super handy. There's as we mentioned on the case, there's MIDI in, out, and through, as well as a USB. I can't remember the names of USB type connections, but
Yeah.
the one that you can send MIDI through. So I just hooked my laptop up to the modular through MIDI, and I could, or through USB, and I can be sending all kinds of MIDI information back and forth as I please through the micro MIDI module. And then the micro scale on the left-hand side was the final sort of module in that first batch. And this is something that I have, I guess it was important to me because it's the type of function that I have often used or wanted out of a lot of the musical devices and the software that I've used, where it takes an input of audio and then it quantizes the pitch. So you can set a scale, and like no matter what note comes into it, it will change it into whichever notes you determine, just based on whichever is closest to it. And then it also has a B output, which there's a few different modes that allow you to harmonize with that input. So you can choose, do you want it to be 3 steps above diatonically or chromatically within the scale that you're working on. And yeah, so that's just something that that I thought I would definitely use a lot, because I am, as much as I love all different kinds of sounds, I do work very frequently in the Western scale paradigm. So I love my 12 chromatic notes and my major and my minor, and being able to have something like that was important to me, so that I could yeah, have a way to kind of make something more musical in that paradigm.
Yeah. Must Be Tuesday in the YouTube chat is asking, do I have to have, hypothetically, do I have to have a rack? What if I just got a couple of modules and put them on the desk? What are the power inputs like? I mean, you can. There's a great video that was by a guy called Milo Melodies, who makes great modular content, full stop. But it was for Future Music Magazine, I think, on their YouTube, where he made a cardboard case. So he had to buy the rails to mount the modules on, the kind of metal rails, which can be bought separately if you want to DIY a case, and just got some heavy duty cardboard and built a quite nice looking single row case. I guess you could paint the cardboard. If it was black or something, you might not even realize it's cardboard. Definitely buying a case is a better option though, especially if you're going to travel with this stuff. The back of a module, I can grab one, there's some spare stuff floating around. So that's the front of a module. This particular one is a sequencer. You can see the numbers 1 to 4, so time runs along, and we can switch on and off gates to create rhythms. A really basic step sequencer. But around the back, it's bare circuit board. There is no kind of back piece on this like a guitar pedal, and that's the power cable. So power goes in. Again, we're not going to get too heavy on technical aspects, but power in the module, you need to plug this power in to the power supply that will be in the case, and you just kind of see the pretty front end or not. There's lots of nice designs, simple designs, some out there stuff, but you just see the kind of nice front of the module. You don't see the board and things once it's going. So yeah, you do really need to buy a case. Or at least some I think someone made a Lego case as well. I'm sure if you put
that, yeah. You can get creative with it, but yeah, it's just you need something to hold it and to make the power a little more organized. Yeah, otherwise it's like if you're gonna eat dinner and you just put all your food on the table, like just use a plate.
Yeah,
it solves a lot of problems.
Yeah, so in terms of your modules, certainly my kind of audience are kind of heavy on wanting to know the specific modules and things. How are you finding this kind of first bunch? And I'll pull your case image back up. We should mention this website. So
Yes.
muffwiggler.com, which comes from the Big Muff pedal by Electro Harmonics, and the Wiggler, I think it was a flanger pedal. So it's not as crude of a name as it suggests. Muffwiggler.com. It's a bit of an odd English word, Muffwiggler, but
well, that's the forum.
Yeah, that's the forum.
The Eurorack forum, and we're on Modular Grid here.
Yeah, so you should definitely go join Muffwiggler. That is the forum for this stuff.
I've learned so much from there. Yeah,
an amazing community. Then the second site, this is modulargrid.net. You can go on, create a free account, and it's basically a playground to what some people call, I'm going to go on there now, and we'll just start a new rack just so people can see. So Modular Grid, I'm logged in already. Let's say new rack, call the rack whatever, 2 rows, 84 HP, horizontal pitch, how wide it is. It's a Euro rack system. What's Kai's case? Shelf can be the look of the case. And it's effectively almost playing Tetris, making this stuff fit in one size. And then it lists all these modules. All the companies go and put their gear on there. We can sort by function. So we can say, okay, I want a distortion. Here's all my distortion options. You can use this just as a point to go and research. But the really cool thing is, if I was just building, let's just throw a few modules in, some distortion, let's say some filters, so on and so on. And we can just drag and drop the modules around and make sure that they fit in the case, and we can think about signal flow, where things are going. So it allows you to kind of design a system without buying it, or once you've got the stuff, try and figure out, this isn't going to fit in that space. So if I want that in the top row, because ergonomically that's where I'm reaching, you can move this stuff around, and it's modulargrid.net. So what Andrew's done is put together his system, which you've got there, and it allows us to kind of share and talk about things. You can also go in and get all the module information as well. So we click on clouds, Mutable Instruments have put all the kind of features, technical information and things like that on the website.
Yeah, it's super handy.
Yeah, really, really great that it's free as well. Really lovely people behind the site as well. Met those guys at an event called Super Booth, for anyone that can get there, that's in Berlin around Easter each year. They kind of took the modular synth section of Music Messe, which is a little bit like NAMM in terms of a huge trade show and exhibition, and just put their own synth event on. Which is amazing. The community aspect of all this is really good. Quite different to other music community stuff I've been involved with. But yeah, I mean, in terms of these initial modules, how is it kind of working from that initial idea and avenues you wanted to explore?
Yes.
Is this fulfilling it, or is it guiding you elsewhere? Is it steering itself in a different direction?
I guess it's the one thing that it is steering me to a little bit that I didn't anticipate is kind of generative ambient music, which is something I've started to appreciate more as I've found like some other artists in the modular community, like Arbeni and Jogging House and Annie, like really incredible, emotive and dynamic ambient music, which is very different from kind of like what I associate with, when I just think of like a new age CD that they put on at the spa or something that's just like pad chords forever. So you can get really like a lot more nuanced and dynamic with ambient music, and that's something that I've started to explore more, just because with the modules I have, that's something that's been very accessible. But yeah, to kind of speak to where I had initially wanted to go and where I still want to go, my sort of 3 branches were processing external audio of all different varieties, making sort of beats, I guess is just the best way to call it, to do some beat
Yeah.
making, but in this sort of new system. And then that sort of wacky, like really complex, for lack of a better term, we can just umbrella it under IDM kind of music that's, very heavily electronic based, really complex patterns and kind of constantly shifting um, sound palettes. So where I've gotten with a lot of these things is not very far because I've been trying to do all of them at once. Like something like the
Yeah.
Varigate is something I got more for the IDM side of things. And I'm like, well, that's awesome to have. And I have been, modulating other stuff with it, but I haven't been using it for like the primary reason why I would want one, which is to sequence drums, because I don't have any drums in here yet. So the thing that I've probably done the most of is processing external audio. I'm bringing things in through the Audio I/O module, and then just kind of like messing with them. I'm using clouds a lot, both as like a reverb and delay, and kind of like just texture generator, but also because I don't have anything else that can work for percussion or that can work as a sampler, I record things in with Cloud's freeze function. Like I'll record
Yeah.
drums off my OP1, and then I'll have like 4 or 5 drum hits in freeze, and I'll modulate the position to kind of jump into different areas of that little recorded buffer. And that is something that I use to generate beats. I'm trying to think what else I can share about how I've explored things so far. I mean, it's been a lot of clouds just because that's the most sort of robust kind of effect module that I have. But I've got like a nice basic filter here. This is the analog or Manhattan analog MA35. So that's just like literally I need a low pass, and that does it for me.
Yeah.
So dual looping delay is down here. That's I haven't explored as much, but again, it's like time-based effects. And then my one oscillator is kind of like the bonus one that they give you in warps to use as a carrier signal. And that's been something where I've actually been able to make some pretty like beefy synth sounds with that, and I play them through my micro brute. So that's another angle that I've been exploring. But yeah, I definitely need, a couple more module purchases in all 3 of these directions to kind of start making more of my vision come to life.
Yeah. I mean, initial impressions of this stuff, is it kind of fulfilling this idea of the path it may lead down, or are there any negatives? I mean, one thing that has come up in previous conversations with me and a couple of people that actually sell this stuff in the UK, there's a handful of kind of shops around the world that sell this stuff, in that it isn't for everyone, I think. Sometimes results aren't repeatable. You can't always get the same results, like recalling something in a DAW, which may be a plus or a negative for some people. I love that. I love the more kind of human, organic nature. And if you know how the modules work, you can get very close, but you can't always get the exact same thing. It's not a recorded piece of audio in any way. Is it kind of fulfilling the idea, or is there anything you find frustrating in any way?
Yeah, no, I like the ephemeral nature of it a lot. I think it forces you to make decisions about where you want to take your music. I run everything through the audio I/O and into a Zoom recorder, so that I can be ready anytime to just hit record if I like what it's doing, because I know I may move a knob and then not be able to get back to where I was. Or, I know that I'm going to want to start another patch the next time I open this up. So, why go through the trouble of writing down how to do it and rebuilding it? I should just act on the idea I have here, get what I want out of it, have it recorded, and then I can move on. So I do really like that a lot. And I think, there's pluses and minuses. I also love the recallability of stuff in your DAW, of digital stuff that allows you to kind of like store ideas for later, allows you to recall things exactly as they were, allows you to apply presets. But there is something really nice about the ephemeral nature of modular that I think makes you work in another way that is very much enjoyable. The only downside I really can think of is just the fact that it's a large financial investment. Because
Yeah.
the ideas that I have, I know that they will be possible eventually, and it's a matter of getting the right module or the right few modules to execute those ideas. Because with the sheer amount of stuff that's out there, nearly anything you can think of doing in terms of like processing your audio is possible. So yeah, I
Yeah, I
think that's
mean,
the only thing.
in a very different direction, but if you said, and we spoke a little bit about getting into modular and things a while ago, but if you kind of came and said to me, or anyone said, I want to build the ultimate mono synth for basses, then they make techno or hip hop or whatever that is. The fact that you can kind of rebuild a classic synth, like say a Mini Moog, for example, but you really like the flavor of filter that's in one of the Korg synths or the Oberheim synths, that's the kind of instant kind of, I guess, understanding of the kind of modular concept is, oh wow, I can build a Moog where I can put an extra Oberheim style filter right after the Moog one. And then you kind of go past that into, well, actually, I don't want basic envelopes. I want something that's a bit more out there, and maybe that's Buchla based, or maybe I want this kind of really kind of East Coast or Roland based subtractive synth. Like most of the classic synths and a lot of software are what's considered East Coast, very Moog like in nature, oscillators into filters. And then there's the West Coast side where they tend to take, it's more additive in nature. They would take a simple wave and fold it and frequency modulate. You can do both at the same time in the same patch without having to buy two separate systems. And then the day after, you could repatch it and just make kick drum sounds and get 10 or 20 new kicks into a sampler for using in a DAW or even into a sampler module. I think it's really cool. So I guess kind of what's next module wise? Have
Yeah,
you got a kind of clear vision now, or is it just more of wanting to encompass everything and all the kind of avenues you want to explore? Has it pushed you to explore one of them more than the other in the kind of instant or near future?
yeah, that's a great question. And what I'm finding is that as much as I love processing stuff off my OP1 or my voice or an instrument through the modular, whenever I do that, I feel like I want to be able to do more to the audio at the source. I feel like it's still a little bit limiting because, you're working with a machine where there's so many different possibilities for modulation, but when you're processing external audio, that just kind of comes in as almost as like it's a recording or something, because you can't do too much to it. So definitely getting more sound sources in here, some kind of sampler, drum trigger kind of thing. That I think is my next step, rather than pursuing as much of the external processing stuff for now, which would entail buying a lot more effects modules. But I'm really more interested in just working entirely within modular and having sound sources where like every parameter can be modulated by something else. Because that's just more exciting to me to go full modular with that. And then another thing that I am thinking too is like I need a maths. I need I need some modules that will provide me with a lot more precise CV control, rather than I've got like a pulse and like this slew here, but I don't have anything really where I can set like a proper LFO up. Streams is all right as a VCA, but yeah, it's not as flexible as I'd want it to be. So yeah.
We should we should mention maths. I'll pull maths up. It's kind of you've got to have at least one maths. It's a company called
Dissonant.
Make Noise.
I'm seeing in the comments is mentioning the Basimilus Iterates Alter, which is a amazing drum module I've played with a bit, and it's on like my must-have list. It sounds amazing, and there's so much tweaking you can do with it.
Yeah, Dissonant. He's flying through these YouTube comments. Obviously, you can't see this as part of the video if you're watching post live stream, but he's answering a lot of questions. He's on form in there. Yeah, he suggested a VCO and then the Bassimilar Satiritas Alter, which is a really good complex drum voice. Lots of modulation points. It can be a kick, it can be a snare, it can be a cymbal, it can be some alien wop, cowbell. But all the exciting stuff to me is all those in-betweens. When it's not quite a kick, when it's not quite a snare, or I mean, you do lots of that with sampling already, so I'm sure that's the kind of appeal as well. All these kind of suggesting sounds and influences. A lot of that came up with conversations with friends around this reissued 808, that I like to be able to kind of hint at the feeling that the kind of real 808 evokes, and that early hip hop and things like African Bambaataa and some of the kind of early house and techno, but I don't necessarily want a real 808. I like to be able to get close and just hint. It's a bit like the kind of 303 acid thing. I like to be able to hint at these kind of pinnacle moments in electronic history, but I'm not too fussed about recreating them exactly how they were.
Yeah, and those sounds have been used so much now that, yeah, why not explore something a little different?
Yeah. I'll pull an image up of maths. This is kind of, you'll start to see this for anyone watching that is getting into Eurorack Modular, that you have to buy a maths. It's one module that offers a lot of control, does 2 rows of blue knobs, which is channel 1 and 4. It's a 4-channel device. Can create envelopes or LFOs, but rather than having preset shapes for the LFOs like a sine or a triangle, you select the rise and the fall time. So if they're even, it's going to be very triangle-like. If there's a very fast rise but a slower fall, it's going to be more like a saw wave. If there's a long rise time but an instant fall, that's going to be like a ramp wave. And you can control the curve of this. You can use voltages to influence those LFO timings. You can re-trigger the start of them. You can have them not cycling and just be envelopes that only play when you tell them to. And the other channels, it's a lot of kind of, it's a little bit hard to get your head around possibly at first. I remember scratching my head with this, getting into it myself. It's attenuating, offset, inverting, controlling the level of things. Any kind of synth or software that you've used where you can turn up a depth control or an amount or a level. These, say, channels 1 and 4 here will just put out their full voltage range for the LFOs. So if you don't want that to be as drastic of a modulation, you're going to need to attenuate that in some way. And maths lets you do lots of this all at once, very precisely, all under voltage control. So you can have one envelope that controls another one and vice versa. It's based on, and it might be slightly easier to get your head around for people wanting to really get into researching this, it's based on a dual slope generator by Surge, which was another modular format entirely. And that's kind of where the history of this has come from, for those wanting to look further into it. But yeah, you've got to get a maths, is the short kind of response to that.
Question for me as a modular noob.
Yeah.
Before maths was around, what was there like a go-to LFO envelope generator? Like, what was the scene like? Because like it's such a staple now, but I haven't heard of anything before that kind of like was as ubiquitous and filled its functions.
You know, I don't know. It's the honest answer. The first version of maths was out before I kind of started looking for that. But if we, I mean, let's just do it right here on the show. If we go on Modular Grid and we look for LFOs, this by default will be kind of done by dates. If I keep scrolling down, as horrible as this may be to watch on screen, I imagine something from Dope for probably. Yeah, so as we kind of scroll up, the more kind of
Pittsburgh stuff, yeah.
Yeah, the more kind of lab equipment look that Dope4 has. Dope4, I mean, invented the Eurorack format for anyone that's new to this that's watching in the mid-90s. So everyone kind of hails Dope4 as kind of Eurorack king. He's a lovely, humble person, both online and in person. Anywhere you see Dieter Dope4. But everybody kind of owes a lot of credit to Dieter. Very simple modules in terms of how they work, but they're often quite cheap. but they're very good as well. So that's a basic dope for LFO. That I guess is quite simple to understand compared to a lot of the Eurorack stuff. We can see the jacks running down the left-hand side and their wave shapes. We've got a ramp at the top, then a saw wave, a sine and a triangle and a square. We have a frequency, so how fast it's running, and then I think it's medium, high, and long frequency ranges. And that's it. Super simple LFO. But as it says, they're €60, which is a lot cheaper than most modules. So you can build up a significant amount of kind of dope for equipment much cheaper. I think Maths was one of the first ones. There was the Peg from 4MS around the same time, which is a digital module. So what that allows is to lock the cycle times to a tempo. If you can feed it a clock or a metronome from somewhere, it will lock the full kind of cycle to 1 beat or 2 beats. It's all divisions of time in a kind of musical context as opposed to just analog and free flowing. Both have their advantages, but on a Peg you can kind of get your metronome and your clock in and then say, I want this LFO to be 4 clock pulses or 5 or 3 times faster than the clock pulse or 2 times faster. Cool. So it's kind of a different approach to a similar thing. The Peg and Maths, they do sometimes come up together, but Maths is that kind of real peak of you've got to have a Maths in a Eurorack system. Yeah, in terms of other stuff, I'm not too sure. I mean, for fleshing out a system, I definitely kind of go dope for. The resale value on the stuff's quite good. I don't know what it's like when it kind of gets, as I said, stateside and in Canada. Certainly in Europe, dope for a German company. It stays very cheap. It does in the UK as well. You get a lot for the money, really.
Yeah, it definitely seems like a very utilitarian company.
Yeah. Just I want one more envelope, so spend less money than other people and just get one. Maybe less exciting to look at. That comes up every now and then, but you do need some utilities as well as all the kind of nice, kind of sexier modules out there that people gravitate towards. Well, yeah, cool. That's kind of everything I wanted to cover in this kind of getting started show. I wanted it to be a place where people could come and see either someone they're aware of or someone I think they should be checking out and be aware of if they're not, getting into modular, or someone that's been into it, their experience is getting into modular and what's worked well, what's not, the kind of approaches, what they think it allows them to do. Because I think a lot of people are on the fence. Modular's certainly getting into people's consciousness, and more wider kind of internet music technology posts, Synthtopia, Fact Magazine, all those places are talking about this stuff.
Yeah, I think definitely, if you continue to have these conversations with other musicians, it would be great. Like the amount of information that is available is really astounding, but it also, you really have to kind of like dig around in a lot of different places right now to kind of figure out what your approach is to getting started. So I think it would be really helpful to just hear from other people how they did it and what they kind of came up against along the way.
Yeah. And technical aspects, those things are covered elsewhere. If you want to get onto the Muffigler forum and find out what's a switching power supply, why would I want one, why may I want another, that's kind of better covered elsewhere, I think, in more technical, heavy tutorial style content. I should say, for anyone new, either to my channel or that certainly come through kind of Andrew's audience or just random internet, if you found this video and stuck with us, I make videos for all this stuff. Most of the modules we spoke about, I do kind of fairly technical heavy, but with musical examples, demos of modular gear. That's my channel. That's what DivKid is in terms of its life online. So if there's anything you want to ask or get in touch, feel free. DivKid video on YouTube if you don't realize where you actually are, if this is posted somewhere else. Andrew Huang on YouTube as well. Your website, I'll link all this in the description. Anything to kind of sign off or point people towards, things coming out, things coming up?
I've got a lot of stuff on the go right now. I'm working on my first video with the modular, and it's kind of I'm not sure when that's going to come out because it's really kind of growing and changing, and I'm not sure exactly, what the right introduction for the vast majority of my audience is going to be to this stuff. But that will be coming. And yeah, beyond that, one really big music video that I'm premiering at Buffer Festival this year that'll hit my channel a week later. That's been over 3 years in the making. I think that's the big exciting thing coming up. It's got a alien invasion of sock puppet monsters, so look out for that music video.
One thing I did want to ask, and right at this point while we were signing off, you often make sample packs for your Patreon supporters.
Right.
Will they be getting some modular sounds for those that are thinking, I've heard modular videos, some of it's a bit more out there than the kind of software stuff I'm hearing, and they're wanting to grab sounds. Are you going to have some for your Patreon supporters?
Yeah, I think I will. Or? I think that a lot of the sample packs that I do are more one-shot based, so it'll kind of depend. I don't see myself kind of creating a patch and then playing every note on the scale with it and
yeah, of course,
those out for people. But yeah, I'll see where I get with it, because I think in terms of creating some interesting sounding drums, definitely, creating some sound effects, definitely. So I think there will be some modular sample packs in the future for anyone who's following me.
Yeah, cool. Perfect.
Awesome.
Well, thank you very much for your time. And as I said, anyone, where can people find you? Is it easy to get in touch with you online? Are you happy me telling people to send you messages?
Yeah. I mean, Twitter is sort of the best thing. I try to respond when I can. It's just like, it's fast and it's open on my phone a lot anyway, just for what I'm checking. But yeah, I'm at Andrew Huang on Twitter. And if you're on one of my videos a few hours after it's released, I'm usually looking at the comments too. Those are kind of probably the best ways.
Yeah, cool. Well, that, and for me with modular questions, certainly get in touch wherever you find me. We'll try and help with that kind of getting into modular or any of life's questions. I will attempt to give some Yorkshire, North England wisdom on the topic, whatever that may be. Cool. Thanks to everyone.
Thanks everyone who was watching here, and Ben, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for everyone in the chat as well. It's great to kind of pull comments in as we go. And yeah, thanks, and see you soon.
Awesome. We'll see you guys later.